first things I want to start talking about today was Sambo. You haven't been since we started training the Sambo, right?
No, so Sid's getting ready for a contest, so you've been getting him ready, but I then wrecked my ankle thinking it was 20, so I've not been.
Yeah, so there's a Sambo competition coming up, and it actually is in 2 or 3 weeks or something like that. And it's quite interesting, man, because I'd never trained a student for Sambo before, so I didn't know exactly what the rules were. So I Googled them, and then I put a couple of messages on some threads and stuff like that to try to figure out the nuance, right? I looked at the rules, but the nuance was lost on me because I've never done it before. And it's quite interesting. Hey, it's like a combination of Judo and BJJ, but you're not allowed to choke, right? But you are allowed to do arm locks and leg locks. And not only that, you're allowed to do bicep slicers and calf slicers. You're allowed to do hip spladles and hip pulls, and basically all the painful, horrible submissions are totally illegal. And then like the efficient ones that are quick and painless are illegal.
Not allowed. I'm very surprised chokes are not allowed in it, because Khabib's known for choking people, and that's his background.
Well, I should distinguish combat Sambo from sport Sambo.
Okay.
Right? Combat Sambo is basically like amateur MMA. Right? They wear the gloves, they wear the MMA gloves, they can kick each other, they can punch each other, then they can choke each other as well. So those rules are quite different, but this is sport Sambo and not combat Sambo. And I mean, like when you're competing, the rule set really matters.
Yeah.
Right? Depending on what the rules are will totally change the game. And first of all, when you can't choke, it changes everything, because the whole game of like taking someone's back changes, right? I'm not necessarily trying to like take your back to choke you. Instead, I'm trying to pin you. I'm trying to hold you down. So it's a combination in that sense of like wrestling and judo, and then there's a few submissions that you're allowed to do as well. And so basically, if you shoot in, you don't have to worry about getting guillotined. You can turn your back and you're not have to worry about getting choked as much. But there's things that they do like the calf slicers, and they'll fly quickly into arm bars. Also, you're not allowed to close your guard. So, like, because you're pinning, right? Because the objective is to pin your partner, to pin their shoulders down. And so the rules are quite weird, hey? So, but I found it interesting because the rule says you're not allowed to close guard, like half guard, close guard, because it creates stalling. Yeah. Which at first made sense to me. But then I posted on Reddit, on our Sambo, to try to find out the nuance of the rules on the bottom. So I was like, okay, you can't play guard, so what's the rule? Or what's the goal, right? Yeah. And everybody that responded to me basically just told me, oh, the goal is just to turtle up and stall until they stand you back up. So I was like, wait, you're not allowed to close the guard, not allowed to close the half guard,
but
because it's
stalling. Turtle's fine.
And not only that, but I spoke to Tim, our judo coach, who's a Sambo champion in Singapore, and he was like, oh yeah, they only give you about 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and then they stand you up. I'm like, Jesus, so you only have to stall for like 2 or 3 seconds and they stand you up? So it got me thinking a couple of things, right? The first one is the limitations of every martial art in isolation, right? It was like, if you're doing BJJ and you're not throwing strikes, that's a game changer. If you're doing like sport Sambo and there's no chokes, it changes everything. Like, yeah. It just and part of that's cool because it creates specificity for one style of training and makes some moves very, very good. Judo, right? You're not allowed to shoot in the legs, right? Greco-Roman, you're not allowed to shoot in the legs. Like freestyle wrestling, you're not trying to stand up from the bottom. You're trying to flatten out. All these little nuances really, really change the style, and you really start to see how limited certain martial arts are, like in pure isolation, right? In the gi, you're not allowed to heel hook. Okay, well then that changes a lot of the leg entanglements that you be put into, right? It's quite interesting to think about.
Yeah, I've never I've seen some combat Sambo, but I've never seen pure Sambo. I actually didn't know there's a difference between the two. I thought it was just all mad Russian stuff where they tried murdering each other.
Well, and this got me thinking on another subject, right? And I don't know if any of the listeners actually know this. I'm sure there's almost everybody that's listening to this is a martial arts practitioner, but many of them may not actually know the history and the interconnected history between judo, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, sambo. And it's quite fascinating, actually. I'm a little bit of a martial arts historian. I don't go like balls deep in it or anything. But are you familiar with the connection?
Didn't Sambo come about because Russia had a war with, I think, Japan, and then their troops got absolutely like mullered in one-on-one combat, and they were like, "Oh, we need to do something about this." Or is that complete bullshit?
Well, there's some truth into that, and the actual story is even crazier, right? So the origins of Sambo and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Judo are completely intertwined, right? there's this really famous judo academy in Japan called the Kodokan Gym, basically Kodokan. You can even Google this and maybe pull this up. And the founder of judo is a guy called Jigoro Kano. So yeah, pull him up. We'll start there, and it'll give a little background.
Because that's easy to spell.
Kanogigoro, something along those, right? Jigoro Kano, or Kano. Fun fact: I think the martial arts character Kano was named after this guy. But what the fuck
What
are you?
the
Put
hell?
that up on the screen. Pull that up so we know. What are you? Hey, come on, man. Look at that. How dare you?
So, what's this got to do with Sambo?
So it's Kano. By the way, for the listeners, Jake just pulled some hentai up on my screen over here. Okay. And space J-I. Yeah. There you go. Kano Jigoro. Right. So this is the founder of judo. He's a Japanese guy. Actually, he was a Japanese school teacher. And he basically founded modern day judo, right? And he had this really famous academy. Yeah, there he is. Pull him up on the main screen. Look at that beautiful, beautiful man. Beautiful old man. So that's this guy. And now you can keep me in the corner there. Pull his Wikipedia page up. And then we'll read the first little bio about him, and then you can go down to notable students. And once you start to see his notable students, this is where this will get interesting. So Jigoro Kano was the head of this famous judo academy, and he's actually the founder of judo, sort of the godfather of it. And with him, and as I said, he was a school teacher. He's basically the person who trained a very familiar name for a lot of you, Maeda, who's the Japanese judoka who taught Carlos Gracie, and who taught França. He's the other branch of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And then he is also the instructor of the guy that brought Sambo, or he took judo to Russia and then gave birth to Sambo. So to all my Muslim and Russians brothers who are listening to this podcast, we are like martial arts cousins. So Jake, do me a solid, man, and read that introduction bio there about Jigoro Kano.
So we have... he was a Japanese educator, athlete, and founder of Judo. Judo was the first Japanese martial art to gain widespread international recognition and the first to become an official Olympic sport. Pedagogical innovations attributed to Kano include the use of black and white belts and the introduction of the Dan ranking.
So that's interesting. He's also the first person to create the white and the black belts that are pretty much universal across all martial arts now, or traditional martial arts anyway. So sorry, go on.
And the introduction of the Dan ranking to show the relative ranking among members of a martial arts style. Well-known mottos attributed to Kano include maximum efficiency with minimum effort.
There you go. Say that again.
Maximum efficiency with minimum effort.
So you can see the gentle art type comparisons already, right? Being efficient with your energy. And by the way, he's a small guy, right? And so anyway, let's finish this up.
And the other well-known saying is mutual welfare and benefit.
Yeah. Okay. So now this is the founder of judo, and he's the one who got into the Olympic Games, and he had this really famous academy where he had international students who trained with him. And now do me a favor and go to notable students. It should be if you go up, Jake, in the side panel, zoom in there, below his image.
Oh, okay.
And you can even throw that on the main screen as well. No one wants to see my face. Yeah. So pull that up. Look at that first name there, Mitsuyo Maeda. Maeda is the Japanese guy who went to Brazil and taught his version of judo. Actually, back then it was actually called Kano Jiu-Jitsu. That was the original name of it, right? And so he taught Maeda, who then taught Carlos Gracie, who then later taught Helio Gracie, and he also taught França. And this is a little bit of martial arts history, but everyone attributes all of the Brazilian jiu-jitsu lineage to the Gracies, but there's actually two. Yeah. There's actually two masters, França and Carlos Gracie, and they split. And GF Team is part of the split, right? GF Team is the other side of the tree, right? Along with some other lineage, including Andre Pederneiras, who's a really famous coach. Now, there's one other one I want you to look at here that's very interesting, right? And that's see if his name...
Let me see if we can guess. Is it the Japanese sounding names or the Russian name?
Yeah, so Vasili Oshchepkov, right? Click on him. Okay, so this is the father of Sambo, right? He trained at the Kodokan Academy with Kano, with Maeda. And this guy is where it dates back to the story that you're talking about, the Russo-Japanese War, because he went to Japan under some scholarship to study, and then started training judo there under Kano, and then crazily enough went back to Russia, started teaching students there, started creating this sport of Sambo, and then later on was put in a prisoner of war camp because they thought he was a Japanese sympathizer, and he thought he was a spy, and then they fucking killed him when he was in a prisoner of war camp, shot him in the head, and then later, years later, after his death, exonerated him because he was innocent. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that's insane.
That is crazy. So this guy who's the father of the national sport of Russia was killed wrongly in a prisoner of war camp, executed by you know what? Why don't you? Can you? If you zoom out a little bit, Jig, on his find death on this guy, Vasili Oshchepkov. It's down there. Can you read what it says in regards to his death? Because it's just crazy. And again, these are our martial arts cousins here. This would be like if Helio Gracie was found treasonous and then shot in the head in a concentration camp or a prison camp.
So we have on the night of 1st to 2nd October 1937, you have to say his name.
Oshchepkov?
Was arrested. He died in Petrivka prison, officially of a heart attack. In reality, he was...
Hold up. Yeah. Officially of a heart attack. Now, go ahead and continue the rest of that sentence.
In reality, he was accused of being a Japanese spy, and 10 days after his arrest, was shot in the head for his fraternization with Japanese imperials. In 1957, Vasili
Oshchepkov
was posthumous. I can't say that word.
Posthumously. Come on,
Posthumously.
Jake. You're an English teacher, bro.
No, I'm definitely not an English teacher.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
You're not an English teacher, but music teacher.
Yeah, pardoned and found innocent of any wrongdoing.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Pardoned and found innocent of any wrongdoing. So, what could have been? What could have been? But, you know, I always find this interesting, right? Because, first of all, I've always been a fan of Sambo in regards to its efficacy. I mean, obviously, jiu-jitsu and MMA is life for me, right? And Muay Thai, I love all martial arts equally. And but I always found it interesting because, I mean, Fedor was the obvious first representation of Sambo, particularly combat Sambo, in MMA. But now you're seeing a whole new animal with these Sambo fighters coming into the UFC and coming into MMA. I mean, one of the top contenders in one is a Dagestani Russian Sambo fighter. You have how many? Of course, Khabib. You have Islam. You have the whole Nurmagomedov group. You have Usman Nurmagomedov, who someone commented and wanted us to talk about, who fought in Bellator. You have a top contender in the Bellator, is it middleweight or light heavyweight division? He's also a Russian Sambo guy. Like you have Zabit, right? Magomed Sharipov, a Sambo guy. You have the king of Kung Fu. What's that guy's name? Really, really interesting. I believe he's also a Dagestani or a Russian Sambo fighter. I mean, so Sambo in Russia is developing in the way that BJJ is developing in the last 10 or 15 years in America and in Brazil and also in Europe and everywhere else too. Like, man, you get these Sambo fighters, quote unquote Sambo fighters. Of course, they have amazing ground skill, the throws and the trips, but then you got like Zabit doing jump, spinning back kicks off the cage, like the Showtime kick, and spinning back kicks, and you have this guy, the King of Kung Fu, or is it the King of Kung Fu? Damn, I can't remember this guy's name.
I vaguely know what you mean, and I can even see his face.
Yeah, me too. He just fought a few months ago, I think on Fight Island. But anyway, my point is that you have these guys, and of course Fedor, right, that are developing Sambo, and so many people don't even realize that train now that those are like our martial arts cousins, right? Those are our brothers. All comes from this guy, Jigoro Kano. And with no disrespect to the Gracies, of course, when Maeda took jiu-jitsu, his version of jiu-jitsu, to Brazil, obviously that culture and that people took it and ran with it and made it evolve in an incredible way, and they deserve all the credit for that. But the origins of all of these grappling martial arts are Japanese. Whether it's Sambo in Russia, whether it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Brazil, and then when they brought it to America, America put their little flavor on it. And there are histories of grappling martial arts outside of that. I mean, there's like American catch can wrestling, and there was you have still pancration, which is from Greece, right? And then you had wrestling, which was in the Olympics, and freestyle and folk style. They have a different base, but kind of as we know with the gi, you know what I mean, with the belts, that form of grappling. Sambo uses the gi, Judo uses the gi, BJJ uses the gi. It's all comes from this Kodokan
this one guy.
Judo Academy in Japan. And it's fascinating, right? I don't know. I'm fascinated by martial arts history. I find it very interesting. And you can watch it evolve like it's an organism, right?
Yeah.
The evolution of martial arts in the last... What was Kano's... he died in 1910 or 1911 or something like that, I think.
He was... Just bringing it up now.
No, maybe it was in the 30s. What is that?
Oh, 1938.
Okay, yeah, 1938. Yeah, he died in 1938 and got judo into the Olympics, and you think about his students and the effect that they've had on the world, and not only that, but like creating their own versions of his systems, right?
Yeah.
And then now they're like level of national attachment that they have, right? I mean, you have Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is of course the national martial art effectively of Brazil, right? Sambo is the national martial art of Russia, Judo in Japan, right? I mean, and then of course America now with like no-gi. I would say America is the mecca of no-gi in particular, but it's funny how it all traces itself down, right?
Yeah.
And where it's gone to at this point.
It makes me wonder, like, what else is there to discover? Like, is there another martial art out there that somehow no one's thought, oh, that worked really well?
Well, it's still evolving for sure. I mean, if you
Yeah.
look at the success of the inside heel hook in the last like 5 years, I mean, in some of the transitions, I mean, there's new guard, the K guard, right? There's new guards developing really, really quickly and new iterations. And then none of this is to disparage the effect that like Sambo and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu have had on MMA, right? Which is the way to combine all of these elements, right? When you're combining the boxing, the Muay Thai, the Taekwondo, the Judo, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the Sambo, the punching on the ground, the Vale Tudo, which is kind of like the Brazilian version of combat Sambo, right? The Vale Tudo where they actually would fight on the ground with their Jiu-Jitsu. So MMA is kind of the melting pot that all of these things have come into. And then you start to see how these individual martial arts have flavored it, right? Because then you can have you can have the people that want to mostly grapple and mostly wrestle, or you can have the Muay Thai guys that tap the like front foot, and the like Western boxers, and they all found their own way to be effective, right? Which is what makes it interesting.
Yeah. It's what you see more and more of as well today is that you've no longer got the specialists. Like everyone can now do everything to a certain extent. Like MMA now, I would say, is its own martial art in a way, if that makes sense. Like you can go to school and just learn MMA, and then you're getting all those things put together instead of being a BJJ specialist, instead of being a Muay Thai specialist. You actually can now go and just be an MMA specialist.
Yeah, what makes that interesting too, I think, is that the martial arts is so dynamic. I mean, just going back to trying to teach one of my students some Sambo, right? Like we have 2 Judo black belts that work for us at Stronghold. And I'm a Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and obviously I know how to collar fight, and I know some basic trips and some basic throws and stuff, but my level of proficiency in the pure Judo is not nearly as high as like a Judo black belt, right?
Yeah.
But my wrestling is higher, right? So it's funny because if you go to an MMA school, you're sort of stuck with dealing with these specialists, right? And they're flavoring your style. So as I'm teaching Sid all of these certain moves, like, actually in Sambo, you can ippon, right? So you can get an instant win by hitting a perfect throw. And a perfect throw means like I throw you or I trip you or I do whatever, and if I can stay on my feet throughout the process. So if you pull me down and I land in the side control or I do that, then that's points.
Yeah.
But if I can hit you with a perfect throw and I land squatted in front of you with my balance on my feet, that's an instant win, like a submission.
Yeah.
Right? So, boom. Match is over instantly. And I find that interesting, but my point is if you go and you train at any MMA gym, like you're going to deal with the guy who's got the boxing wrestling. You're going to deal with the guy who's got maybe some kickboxing experience and is like a jiu-jitsu whatever belt. And then you're going to deal with the guy, maybe he's an MMA fighter, but has he done clinching in Thailand? Okay, well, is this guy a judo black belt? And like the level of skills are so diverse and there's so many ways you can do it that there's really no one way.
Yeah.
Because we've had effective wrestler boxers, right? We've had effective like Khabib, like take down, wrestle, fuck, get on top, submit you. We've had successful all of that. We've had the Anderson Silva slick strikers that are jiu-jitsu black belt. Wrestling's maybe not perfect, but maybe dangerous from their back. And you've seen so many different versions of it that work that there is no right answer. But it's interesting how like where you are and the styles that have influenced your coaches can affect the way that you perform, right?
Yeah, it's if we touch semi-tight into the UFC today, like I always think it's interesting with the European fighters, and Vittori's actually different to this, that I think the European fighters often struggle with grappling because it's just not a thing in Europe particularly. Like no one wrestled when I grew up.
It doesn't have its own tradition in the same way of grappling, right?
Yeah.
But
like,
what they have is boxing.
Yeah.
And kickboxing.
Yes.
You go to Holland,
the
you go
Dutch
to
style of like kickboxing, that's Europe-wide. And obviously boxing's huge in Britain.
England's had amazing champions. It has 2 current ones. There's been German champions in the past. There's like obviously Holland has amazing kickboxing.
Yeah, but what I cannot tell you, I don't even think we've had an Olympic wrestler.
Yeah.
That is how poor wrestling is. Or if we have, they've been knocked out in the first round. Like,
bro, that's because they introduced alcohol too early, right? And like, those people, they don't want to grapple, bro. They want to get drunk and throw down.
Rip bombs at each other's head.
But what they do have is bare knuckle boxing. That's what they have.
Yeah.
Because hey, if you go to the ground, that's weakness, bro. That's weakness. Stand up, man.
You're being soft. He's so bad that not Vittori, but another Italian was fighting a few weeks back, and they were, instead of saying shoot a takedown, they were telling him rugby tackle, rugby tackle.
That's their comparison. That's funny, man.